So today we have Paul Cope from Liverpool, who healed himself from 3 autoimmune diseases: psoriasis, Crohn disease, and ankylosing spondylitis. All of them are autoimmune diseases. And now he is coaching others how to heal. He speaks about the healing process. And he also wrote a book, How to Solve Any Problem in Life, which the title is in itself intriguing. So good evening, Paul, and thank you for coming. Shall we start at the beginning, how it all started, the issues, the health issues for you?
Yeah, well, the very start when as I reflected on my story, so I've been on the in the healing pathway for nearly 4 years now, probably, and I'm 41 to give everyone a bit of context. So when I looked back over my life, I've actually had health issues since I was a little boy, since I was a baby. Um, Lots of different things. So when I was a child, I can still remember having. So this is probably when I was about 5, 6 years old. I would wake up in the middle of the night with intense pain in my legs, like it felt like someone was stabbing my legs. That's how intense the pain was, and I would scream out, and my parents would come running in, and they would take me to the doctors, and the doctors back then just said, "Oh, that's it's just growing pains." That's how they described them, growing pains, and everyone just accepted that. And then as the years went on, I got something called whooping cough. I don't know what the name for that is internationally, but
I know what it is, yes.
and again, same thing. It was just, oh, it's just a normal thing. And then years later, I developed a skin condition, psoriasis. That was when I was in my early teenage years. Then I started getting a stiff neck when I was around 17. The doctors said that was just because I was revising, I was studying too hard for my exams, which at the time I knew I wasn't. But I was sitting, when the doctor said that to me, I was sitting next to my dad. And I didn't want to say to the doctor, I'm not studying for my exams, because that would have got me in trouble. So I was just like, okay. And then years after that, I started getting bowel problems. Um, and then as the years wore on, I had all of these different things. And I got diagnosed when I was about 23, 24, something like that, with these official conditions. So that's when they started putting names on them. So, as you say, psoriasis, Crohn's disease, and ankylosing spondylitis. So by that stage of my life, I was in a lot of pain. I had a lot of stiffness in my body. I couldn't turn my head. Um, it was really damaging. I'd go to the toilet, 6, 7 times a day, sometimes more. It was really impacted my life. And they told me then, once they diagnosed it all, they said there was treatment. There was revolutionary treatment they could give me, which was biological drugs, basically. So I would go to hospital, and they would put me on a drip, and they would put all of these
Yeah,
drugs inside me.
and then you get tuberculosis or other diseases because the immune system is so suppressed.
Yeah, so that was their explanation was, there's no cause for any of these things. There's no cure, but it's your immune system attacking itself. So these drugs stop your immune system attacking itself. And they said, I remember at the time, they said it increases your chances of getting all kinds of other things like cancer. But at the time I was in such bad pain that I was like, I'll take anything. Like I didn't care. Um, and I'd already looked at some sort of alternate things back then, but this is back when the internet had only just started. So for younger people who listen to these stories, they can't really comprehend that there was a time when there was no internet. But the internet wasn't very old, and always, I mean, it had been going for a while, but it was nothing like it is now. And so I remember there was one guy in America he'd invented a diet that you could try that he said cured ankylosing spondylitis, but it
Which
was
one? Which diet?
the no starch diet.
Low starch, yes.
Yeah, well, it was zero starch. So when everyone I know who's been down this route with ankylosing spondylitis, they all tell us, they all know about that diet, and um, it's horrible. Like it's just such the most soul destroying thing to try and. So you can't eat any bread, pasta, potatoes, any rice, any vegetables, like root vegetables, because they've got starch in them. You couldn't cook things.
It's
So
like a ketogenic diet without carbs almost, no?
no, it was basically like you could eat lettuce. I remember just eating lots of salad, but you could eat so little, it was impossible to give yourself enough calories, and it was just miserable. And everybody I know who tries that was miserable. So when these drugs came along, it was like it was a miracle. I remember they didn't they didn't heal anything, they didn't cure it, but they made the pain reduce. The pain didn't go away, but the pain reduced.
The
Sim-
inflammation biomarkers were high back then.
yes, yeah. I'm just brought everything into under control basically. So that was in my early to mid 20s, and then I just stayed on that path for 10, 15 years. But I was always asking the doctors, the consultants, is there any new research? Is there any developments? Because they were basically saying, no, you just stay on these drugs for the rest of your life. And that didn't fit with me really. I've always been very curious, and
They
so
are
I just
very, very hard on the liver, on the things like Humira and anti-TNF alpha drugs. Yeah, so did you have side effects? Can you describe a day in your life back then with the symptoms and with the drugs?
well, before the drugs, it was one of my vivid memories is I went to a family, the friend of a wedding of a family friend in Las Vegas with my ex-wife and my mum and dad at the time. And it's vivid because of the setting. We went to be in a dream holiday, and it was all fun, and everyone was having a good time. And there were days where I couldn't leave the hotel room because I was in so much pain. It used to feel like I was being suffocated from inside. It was like somebody was inside my rib cage squeezing me, and I couldn't relieve it. And the more I thought about it, the more the worse the pain got. So I would just have to lie down. I couldn't eat. I'd have hot baths to try and make it feel better. It was agony, and it was like I couldn't tell when it would happen. It seemed back then to be random. One day I'd be okay, the next day I'd be not able to get out of bed.
And the
Um,
low starch diet didn't help?
it's like lots of things I've tried over the years. There would be times when it seemed like it was helping, and then not. It would just stop.
And it
And
weakens
and I
you because you miss so many other ingredients you need to have some of the fruit or the things like maybe low carb, okay, but nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Just not healthy at all. And now that I understand what I understand and look back, I realize how damaging all those different things are. But that's much further down the line in the story. So once I started taking the drugs, I do remember at the time saying to the doctors, because they said to me, not these drugs don't work for everybody. Like some people's bodies reject them. They don't integrate. Um, and I was saying, okay, so I just went into it with the mindset that they would work for me, and they did. I never rejected them right from the start. They were okay, and they made the pain. So let's say on a bad day before the drugs, the pain would be 90%. With the drugs, the pain would go down to 10, 15%. So I was still in some pain, but my life became manageable. So I could live a relatively normal life. Um, so my data once I started taking the drugs, my day-to-day life was okay. In my personal life, I was in the early years I was studying to be a lawyer. Then I became a corporate lawyer. So I lived a very stressful personal life and business life. So because I worked for big law firms, then I started my own company, and then at one point I was running 3 companies at the same time.
Yeah,
And
achiever, striving personality.
absolutely, yeah, absolutely, very ambitious, very driven, always trying to prove myself. Um,
Because you are
and
never
then
enough in your
absolutely, absolutely, but I didn't know any of that back then. That was back then. It was just all perfectly normal. I was just a very ambitious person, and everyone liked that. Everyone knew I wanted to be
Yeah.
rich, wanted to have lots of money and buy lots of things, and um, so everyone, in the normal world, everyone was very approving of that. No one would ever connect those two things, but especially back then.
Right.
Um, And then over the years, I was, I'd be saying to the doctors, well, I've been doing some research about this thing and this thing, and they'd always just say to me, no, like, I remember even saying to the doctors once, use me as a guinea pig. Like, let's try different things and keep me under like test conditions, and you can monitor my blood, and we can we can try different things and see what works. And they laughed at me. They laughed and said, no, like, just stay on the drugs. They work for you, so there's no need to do anything else. And then it just got to a point over the years where I'd started seeing some alternative healing things, and I became friends with someone who had Crohn's disease, who introduced me to the world of raw food diets and juice fasting and things like that. So I went down that route to begin with, and then that was for Crohn's, and then I started focusing on the AS, the ankylosing spondylitis, and that's when I came away. I just made the decision to completely come away from the Western medical world, and I stopped. I told the doctors I was going to stop taking the drugs completely. I'd already, by that point, they used to put me on the drugs every 8 weeks. I would go into hospital every 8 weeks, and I would sit there for 2-3 hours, and they would pump my body. But I was lethargic. I could feel it suppress my system. I never felt energetic. I was still working very hard and doing long hours, but never felt great. Had problems with.
And the whole saga is very exhausting emotionally and physically, everything. Like you feel like you are a sick human being and you are young. And can I ask you, you mentioned the raw food diet for the Crohn. Did it help? Did it do good for the Crohn? Did the symptoms of the Crohn disease? Because I know a lady who did it, and it helped her at the beginning, but then she had many deficiencies, and she developed, God forbid, leukemia. So I'm asking about the raw food diet. Did it help you back then?
So similar to the no starch diet and anything else I've seen over the years and tried. I've tried lots of different things. Again, there were times when it felt like it helped, and then it wouldn't. And it actually ties in my story around raw food and especially juice fasting. So I watched some Netflix documentaries, and there's a British guy who healed some physical conditions through juicing, so he says. And he had a documentary on YouTube called Super Juice Me. So there's Super Juice Me. The one on Netflix was called Fat, Sick and Nearly Dead, which was an Australian guy. And I watched these things, and my friend was doing it. So I decided to do a juice fast, which was basically you could only drink the juice of vegetables and juices. You could have some of them as like smoothies, so you could blend a banana into them. So twice a day you could have one avocado or one banana and blend that into your juice and drink that. But you couldn't eat any food, whole food. And the documentaries, they do it for, one of them does it for 28 days. One of them does it for 60 days. And lots of these people, they have different people with different illnesses, and they heal. And I decided to do this. But at the same time, I'd started working with a coach in New York who specialized in healing from illnesses through talking about emotion and psychology and the mind-body connection. And these two things coincide at the very start of speaking to this guy and one of his friends. And this guy said to me, I want you to observe your own thoughts for 24 hours. And this coincided with me doing this juice fast. And I'd been doing a juice fast for 21 days. So I'd eaten no full meals, no real food for 3 weeks. And I hadn't healed. And at the end of the 3 weeks, it just so happened I was doing this exercise, observing my own thoughts. And what I realized was, inside my own head, the story I was telling myself was, I'd done the juice fast, but it said in the plan, that if you were really, really hungry, like starving, you could, to stop that, you could eat, instead of putting the banana or the avocado in the juice and blend it up, you could eat it.
Mm-hmm.
And in 3 weeks, I'd eaten 3 bananas or something like that.
Right.
And I remember saying inside, when I started observing my thought, what the story I was telling myself inside my own head was that I wasn't good enough, because if I hadn't eaten those 3 bananas, I'd have healed. And I've not done enough, and I should have tried harder, and I should have done more. And these people who you see on TV and on the TV shows, they didn't cheat and they didn't eat the bananas. They just did it properly. So it was because I wasn't good enough and I needed to try harder.
Oh,
And that was my breakthrough moment, because all of a sudden I realized whatever diet I was doing, it was in here that was the problem. The story inside my own head. Because whenever I tell that story to people, and at the time, whenever I told someone else I'd done a juice fast for 3 weeks, they were amazed. They were really impressed. They were like, how can you go 3 weeks without eating a meal? And if I said to them, well, I've had 3 bananas in that time, they'd be like, so that's incredible. And my version of the story was, it was rubbish. It wasn't good enough. I'm a failure. And that was the first time I realized I needed to stop focusing on diets and things like that. And I started working with this coach full time in New York, once a week for a whole year. And I was working with a therapist as well at the same time. And that's when I started on the mind body connection.
how soon did you notice a change? Once you observed your thoughts and you catched yourself online on the fly while you were noticing that these thoughts of never enoughness and I'm a naughty boy because I ate 3 bananas. How much time did it take to see a shift, to shift the needle to the right direction of healing?
Well, I think this is a really interesting question, because when I first went to the coach in New York is called Ralph, one of my heroes, one of my favorite people in the world. And when I found him online, he had videos of former clients, testimonials, reviews, saying what their experience. And I always remember one guy said, I started working with Ralph, and 24 hours later, I was fully healed in 24 hours. And he said you could see by his face, like I would tell other people about it, and they would say, oh, he must be an actor. And I'd say, if he's an actor, he should get an Oscar, because you can tell by his face he's telling the truth. He couldn't believe it himself.
Of course.
So when
People don't lie about such things when they themselves suffered. We don't lie about
exactly,
suffering.
yeah, why would you?
Would you?
But
Yeah.
but because of my mindset at the time, the ambitious, driven person, I remember seeing that video and thinking, well, if he healed in 24 hours, so will I. I'll do it in 12. I'll beat him, like a competition.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so one of my problems was, I went into it with the mindset of, like, I'm trying to beat this thing. So I didn't heal physically for many, many months. But what did happen was my life completely changed. So psychologically and emotionally, I was changing, like the change in my internal being. From when I started therapy and coaching, within 6 months, I felt like a completely different human. I started talking, and I still talk like this now, like there's an old me and a new me. I
Yeah.
just I learned all about my emotions and my psychology, and why I was the way I was, and how one of my favorite moments was in the first call with the coach Ralph. He started telling me about my personality. And I remember saying to him, we'd never spoken before. And I said to him, how can you possibly know he got it. It was absolutely right. He described me absolutely right. And I said, how can you possibly tell me my personality? And he said, everybody with AS has got the same personality. And it blew my
Or autoimmune diseases.
Yeah, absolutely. And it blew my mind, because I wasn't aware of any of this world back then. But that was enough to convince me. I was like, yeah, this fascinates me. It makes sense to me. So straight away,
I am curious, how was you said that within half a year your personality changed. What was changing? How different you were? Can you describe the new me?
So the new version just became, I used to always say I would never be content. Like I used to suffer with depression. In my mid 30s, I started suffering with depression, early to mid 30s, suicidal thoughts. I used to think that nothing was ever enough, no matter what I had externally. And I used to say, I don't think I'll ever be content with anything. I always want more. And that switched completely. My desire for material possessions completely changed. My desire to prove myself to the outside world or to myself completely changed. For the first time ever, I became peaceful. I,
Oh,
rem- I, I remember a, a very clear sign that things had changed is my brain used to like spin
sure.
like a hamster on a wheel.
Yeah.
Like it was just always going, and I just thought that was normal. I thought everybody's brain was like that. And then I was chatting to like Ralph and a couple of other people about it. And they said, "No, it's funny. We all think the same thing, but that isn't how lots of people who don't have these problems, their brain is peaceful." And I remember one day, months after starting doing this work, I was walking my dog in the park, and I just suddenly realized my brain was quiet. There was there was no thoughts going through my brain, and
Wow.
that was when I realized things had changed internally. So that the easiest way to describe it is I became peaceful.
Wow, good for you. So the turbo thinking that you described, the what if, the catastrophizing, the anticipating and being ahead of the curve is something really typical to stress, and stress is connected with the inflammation. So this can be one of the explanation, though I think it is simplistic. So how did the physical symptoms changed? What did you notice?
So the interesting thing was, and this ties into a lot of work I do now, I had the three things. So I had psoriasis, Crohn's disease, and ankylosing spondylitis. And my focus was entirely on ankylosing spondylitis. I was trying to heal from ankylosing spondylitis. So I was doing all this work about emotions and psychology and mind-body connection. And I'd done lots of other things as well, like breath work. And I went to Bali at one point. So I did lots of different healing things like
Ah,
sound baths and meditation and anything. You name it, I've tried it. Um, so I was doing all of these different things, but the focus was on healing from ankylosing spondylitis. And then one day I realized my psoriasis and Crohn's had gone. Was it gone? Like no, if I had a conversation with a doctor 2 weeks ago, they've been chasing me at the local hospital to go and see them for a checkup. I haven't seen them for 2 years. And she said to me, "What drugs do you take for your Crohn's?" And I said, "None." And she stopped and looked at me and said, "No one ever says that." And I just smiled and said, "I know."
so
And
how do you explain it? Because you didn't think about this?
yeah, so what I've learned is, and I look back and Ralph was teaching me at the time, but it's very difficult, I think, for most people who are who want to heal from something and even who believe in this, by focusing on healing from something, we're focusing on the illness, not the solution. So what I realized was by focusing on ankylosing spondylitis, my mind was completely off Crohn's and psoriasis. So because I'd done all of the work I needed to do to heal, which was the emotional work, in my opinion, emotional and psychological, and I wasn't thinking about those things anymore. I was just moving on with my life and focusing on something else. They just disappeared. And what I realized with the ankylosing spondylitis was, and I'm just at this last phase of that now, is that I just needed to stop thinking about that as well because I'd done the work. So when I say that I feel healed holistically, that's how I feel. I've done the work. I've done all the emotional stuff. I've done all the psychological stuff. I teach it now. I've written a book about it. I help other people with it. There's nothing. I don't believe there's anything wrong with me anymore. So even these names that we use, ankylosing spondylitis, I always go to people. It's very frightening, that isn't it? Very
Yeah.
frightening name. I go no, because I've still got a bit of pain and tension in my body, but that's how I describe it now. If someone says to me, "Have you got ankylosing spondylitis?" I say no. I've got some pain and tension in my body, but I know what that is. It's the last of the trapped emotions that are just waiting to release. That's all that is.
Oh,
That's the end of it. So it's the I think that's one of the challenges most people face, especially when you have a lot of pain, is how do you stop thinking about the pain? Because by focusing on the pain, you're going to keep the pain. It's serving a purpose, and that's what I realized after a while.
So how can you not think about the pain? What did you think about when so the psoriasis and the Crohn disappeared because you didn't focus on them, and then you decided to um, to do the same thing with the AS, and you stopped thinking about it. What did you think about?
So the key is it's our brain can't stop thinking about something, and that's the thing. So if we try and stop thinking about something, there's the classic, you've probably heard this. There's an infamous example of, if you say to somebody, don't don't think of a pink elephant,
Mm,
the first thing everybody thinks of is a pink elephant, because your brain doesn't understand negative commands. So if you try and not think about pain, that's not possible. You will think about the pain. So you
true.
just need to find something else in your life to focus on and do something. And the way around it I found, which I think helps more with people who are stuck in this thing, and I see it all as a blessing now, it was all as a gift, is that if I hadn't stayed in pain for so long, I wouldn't have learned everything I did. The guy who I've spoken to, the guy who healed in 24 hours, well, he didn't get the gift that I got of being able to work on all of this stuff. I've been working on this stuff for 2, 3 years now. So I've learned intimately, like, all about humans and psychology and emotion. And the difference, I think what the most important thing to do is to change your relationship with the pain. And instead of seeing it as your enemy, see it as your friend. And the more you go, the deeper down this rabbit hole you go, the more you see this. This has been taught for thousands of years, that pain in any form in our life, whether it's emotional or psychological or physical, is a teacher, and it's here to teach us something. So I always say to people now, if you stop looking at your pain like it's an enemy, like a bad guy that you're trying to get rid of, and instead look at it like it's your big brother or your big sister or your best friend, and ask what it's trying to tell you, and then do whatever it's trying to tell you. So from my perspective, in my life, I
Yeah,
was living a life I shouldn't have been living. I was miserable. I was unhappy. I was stressed all the time. I wasn't I wasn't being creative. I was a really creative kid. Like,
yeah,
loved to draw and paint and play and make people laugh. And I'd become a lawyer, a corporate lawyer. So all of those things were just pushed away. There was never any room for any of that stuff. There was no joy in my life. For me to experience joy, I'd need to drink a lot of alcohol, and then that in itself is a depressant. So that you get in this vicious cycle of.
true.
So um, where I went to it with it was, this isn't a bad thing. Pain isn't a bad thing in my life. Pain has been there my whole life, and I went through all kinds of different things. It's hard to summarize sometimes. I went through all kinds of processes with it, and um, I think actually one of the reasons there's still a bit of pain hangs around in my life now is that I've had it for so long, and I see it as such a companion, that there's a part of me doesn't want it to go away now.
Yeah,
And I think this is key. I do a lot of work. One of the big things I do work on, and it's in my book, is about the different personalities we create. We all see ourselves as one person, but actually, when you get into this, what you realize is, over the years, to adapt to a world in which we struggle to live, we create multiple characters and personalities, and they all do something for us. They all help us meet our needs. And the pain character is really powerful for this. One of the things Ralph asked me to do very early on with working with him, and I ask other people to do this now, and everybody reacts the same way, is to say, I want you, he said one week, he said to me, I want you to write down this week, I want you to observe and write down all the benefits you get from being in pain and from being ill. And I said to him, that's ridiculous. Like, why? There's no benefits. I've come to you to heal. It's not a good thing. I hate it. And he laughed and said, just do it and come back in a week. A week later, I came back. I made a list in my phone, and I came back with a list like this long in my phone. Because the first time I noticed, someone would invite me to go to something that I didn't want to go to. And instead of saying, I don't want to go, because I didn't want to upset them, because I was a people pleaser, I
yeah,
wanted everyone to like me. So instead of saying, I don't want to go, I'd say, I can't go, my back's sore. And the first time I did it, my brain went, "Ah, that's the benefit."
Yeah,
You use it as an excuse. You use it as a way to get attention. You use it as a way to get love and connection from your family. Because inside my family, if and it's like this in lots of families, if I'm ill, I get more attention. If there's nothing wrong with me, someone who's sick gets the attention. So my body, when I go back to the very start of the story, my body had been doing this since I was a little boy. When I wanted attention, I wanted connection, and I didn't know how to ask for it. My body go, well, okay, we'll do it. We'll put you in pain, and then your mum and dad will come and cuddle you.
yeah.
And when you start to realize all of these things, the step out of that is to focus on healthier ways to meet the same needs. So if I feel my pain
Yeah, love
increase,
it.
I think what is my body trying to tell me? What am I missing out on? So it might be my anxiety is increased and I'm suppressing the anxiety. So I just need to feel the anxiety instead. Or it may be that I've been angry and I'm not dealing with the anger properly. I'm not processing the anger properly. It can be all kinds of different things. It may be that I want some attention. I want someone to give me a hug. And so now instead of the pain dealing with those things for me, I know how to do it myself. So I know how to ask for things I want. I know how to say, I know how to tell people I don't want to do something because I'm not a people pleaser anymore. I've worked away from that. But it all ties in. The biggest thing it all ties back to is emotions for me, is how we handle our emotions and how we've all been taught from a young age that our emotions are not acceptable. And we've been suppressing them and repressing them for decades, especially things like anxiety and anger and fear. And we basically taught a part of us is not good enough. So we're trying to get rid of it. That's what it comes down to for me.
Wow, this is fascinating. What I have so much to relate to what you are saying, but let's go to your last sentence about the repressing and suppressing emotions. Which of these primary emotions you feel were the most dominant back then? Sorrow, fear, or anger? Which one of these was you think you suppressed the most and was
Uh,
prominent?
well, in what I've learned, anger is the biggest key, the suppression of anger, and that comes from the being taught to be a good boy or a good girl, a good person, the people pleaser. We want to make everyone happy and make sure everyone likes us. And a big one, actually, you mentioned sorrow. I where I tie that in is grief. There was
Grief.
a lot of grief in life that we're not taught. Actually, no one had ever taught me what grief really was. I always thought grief was just what happened when someone died, and I didn't know that actually it's actually more about loss. Like if you lose something and no one's taught you how to handle that emotion. But the two most important ones were anger and anxiety.
So which one was more dominant in your life?
Suppressed anger was the biggest problem because I had lots of people with these conditions. When I share my story, the bit that they really resonate with is outbursts of rage. So I would have, and it ran through my family, like a bad temper, they would call it, like as if it was just normal. Um, where every now and then if you met me in my old life, I was a very calm, laid back type person. But in my personal life, every now and then I would just explode like a volcano. Like there was some serious incidents in my life. I threw a glass at a wall once in an argument with my ex. I smashed a guitar on the floor. I once broke my hand by punching a wall, all kinds of things. And it was because I was suppressing the anger inside me, and it would build up and build up and build up and then explode.
So being able to express it, even if within your family, is a good thing, isn't it?
Absolutely. So I was the way I simplify the explanation to people is we talk about having anger problems, but that's not what we actually mean. There's a language problem. So I always describe it. It's like, so anger is a healthy emotion. Like every emotion is a healthy emotion. It's helped us survive for thousands of years. The problem is when we're taught it's a bad thing, we suppress it. And I think of it like if you think of a bucket, and every time you suppress anger, the bucket fills up a little bit with water, and then at some point it's full. And then one little thing can happen and you suppress anger again and it overflows. And when it overflows, that's when you explode. And what we would usually say in society is that's anger. We point at the explosion and we call it anger. And that keeps us trapped in a vicious cycle. Because then we say, see, anger's bad, which means we try and suppress it. And what I learned was, no, when you explode, that's not anger, that's rage. Rage is the unhealthy manifestation of suppressed anger. And this is lots of the work I do is counterintuitive. And I always explain it to people. The way to stop rage, which is unhealthy, is to healthily deal with your anger, not to suppress your anger, not to push it away, but to accept it, to understand it, and to process it. So now when I feel anger, I don't think it's a bad thing. I just deal with it in all different ways. I've learned how to deal with it. And then the
To
rage just
acknowledge
disappears.
it, first of
Like
all.
acknowledging it is the first step, yeah. And accepting it's normal, it's okay. And that doesn't mean what a lot of people I hear, and when I first learned this, I thought the same thing. That means that you should be going around the world shouting at people to like get this anger out. And I was like, no, that's not how it works. Anger's an emotion like all the other emotions. You can deal with yourself. You can deal with it internally. I do a lot of writing, write down how I feel about things. I'll even speak things out loud. If I'm annoyed about something, I'll talk about it because that in itself acknowledges it. And the new story I have inside my head is it's okay. It's okay to feel angry.
Paul, I want to ask you something as a coach now. I understand very well the need to process our emotions and let them out. And once the bucket has one drop of anger, acknowledge it and process it and let it out smoothly and not reach the point of the overflowing your banks. So my question to you is, on the other hand, there is another type of modality and many people healed with this kind of modality is reprogramming our brain, rewiring our brain. And I'm not talking about toxic positivity of positive affirmations, etc. I am talking about modalities like NLP, and in a way, they remind me of what you said, not dwelling on the problem, but focusing on what you want. And visualizing what you want, focusing on the solution, on the life that you want. And the laws under these modalities is not to speak even words like anger or fear or grief or pain. You change the word pain with discomfort, or in a nutshell, you focus on what you want. You don't say, I have stiffness. You say, I want my joints to be smooth and supple and pliable and malleable and to feel good under my skin. So this kind of modalities that are about reprogramming our brain, rewiring, creating new pathways, they are also very helpful to some people. So I'm curious to know how this way of thinking is congruent with what you are saying about, because you are talking very freely about pain and anger and grief and
So
pain, etc.
it's a really good question. So I'm a qualified NLP practitioner from many years ago. So in my old life, I loved NLP and personal development and self-help and all of those things. And the first thing I always say to everybody is, this is just my opinion. This is my interpretation of all the things I've learned. It works for me. It works for people I've helped. At the same time, there are loads of different things out there that can help. And the most important thing is you do what fits you. So if you've found something, anyone listening who's found something that works for them, or they meet someone and it works and they want to try it, do it. And if it works for you, fantastic. It doesn't matter. Don't worry about it. It can be anything. Where I come from with all of this stuff now is my belief is that, and my belief system is that all of this, the reason my book's called How to Solve Any Problem in Life is that I was focused on health problems to begin with. But what I realized one day was all of my problems in my life came back to the same thing. Over here, I was working on relationship issues. Over here, I was working on my health. Over here, I was working on money issues and business issues. And when I traced them all down to their root cause, it all came down to the same thing, which was I don't feel good enough. I've got low self-esteem. I've got low self-worth. That's what this emotional stuff comes back to. You've been taught that certain things you feel are not good enough. And what I realized with the world of like NLP and things like that, there's a place for it and I think it's great. What I think it does is it misses a very important part. So if you feel, my favorite example is nervousness, right? If you feel nervous about something, in the world of NLP, and this is what I used to believe, if you feel nerves, you're about to present to a room of 1,000 people, or you're about to sing on stage and you feel nervous. The world of NLP says reframe that. It's not nerves, it's excitement. And if you think of it like excitement, it's the same physiology, but you'll feel better about yourself. And that's great if that works for you. My problem with that is it reaffirms the story that feeling nervous is bad. And I don't believe that to be true. I don't believe there are any negative emotions. There are only emotions are not negative or positive. They are neutral, and all we have is stories about them. So I'll say to people, someone will say to me, well, that's not true, Paul. Anger, fear, anxiety, these are all bad emotions. And I say to them, imagine if you could speak to the emotions, what they would say. So, and then picture something like, you're walking through a jungle one day and a lion jumps out of the trees and attacks you. If in that moment, the emotions you feel are love, joy, and happiness, you're going to die. They are bad emotions in that situation. If you feel fear, anger, anxiety, you're more likely to live because they'll help you to survive. So I think if you could speak to I like to personify things because you can picture it. If you could speak to fear, anger, and anxiety, they would all say to you, how dare you call us the bad guys? How dare you say we're negative? We've kept your entire civilization alive for thousands of years. If it wasn't for us, you wouldn't be alive to experience joy and love. And on the other side of that, I ask people very simple questions. I say, have you ever made a bad decision in your life? Or do you know anyone who's made a bad decision in their life and suffered a lot of pain because of love? And everybody says yes. How many mistakes do we make in life because of love? And we say, oh, I was in love and I did this silly thing. Well, in that situation, love's a bad thing. So my thing is there are just stories around these emotions. None of them are good or bad. So if we, with the NLP world, to come back to that, if we don't acknowledge and accept and allow each of the emotions and we just try and reframe them all the time, what we're doing is continuing to suppress them. So for me, there's a middle step. We acknowledge, we see what the emotion is. Then the middle step is we accept it and we acknowledge it and we say it's fine to have it. And then we do the NLP thing of focus on what you want, not what you don't want. But it's really important to me that we acknowledge and accept the emotion first before we move to the focus on the positive. Because otherwise, by focusing on the positive, we're still just repressing and suppressing part of us.
I understand. I understand clearly. Thank you for the explanation. It is just that, in the NLP world, they frighten you almost, that once you use a word, which is word like pain or fear, you are deepening the groove in the brain. It is counterproductive in their eyes, because the words have power and the power of language. And it's true, words have power.
But think about, this is really important. Think about what the power is. The power is in what we believe that word to represent. So if we change what fear means, if we change what pain means, then
Oh,
it has a different power. So to me, pain is not a bad thing. Fear is not a bad thing. I don't think there's anything wrong with fear. Anxiety is a great example. What is anxiety? I often ask people this question, like with different things. Think about what does it do for you? Anxiety is there fundamentally. Think of the lion example. We're all thousands of years old, our systems. Anxiety was there to keep us alive, because if we heard a, a noise in the jungle, it would make us think, oh, what's that? The problem we've got now is we've taken that survival instinct and we live in this very safe world for the most part. And we've not learned how to adapt the way we deal with that emotion. And that's the key, is not to say the emotion is bad, but to learn that it's good and how we can use it beneficially in the world we live in.
I see what you mean. Problem is that like inflammation, there is a difference between acute and chronic inflammation. So the emotions, like if it is an acute fear because of the Lyme, well, of course it is a good thing and it will save you. But when it comes chronic, when this tool of, when this emotion becomes chronic and it runs the show, then it stands in your way, isn't it?
So, but it depends what you mean by an emotion becoming chronic. So for me, the only way an emotion can become damaging in our life is if we don't treat it like this. Like there's no emotion you can tell me where I can't tell you how it does a good, it serves you well in your life. And it only becomes chronic. This is the counterintuitive thing. Lots of this work goes back to Carl Jung, the psychologist, and his phrase of, if what you resist persists, that's this. Like if
Yeah,
one of the ways, and something I teach people I work with now, and I learned this from Ralph, was most of the time, because we've been taught these emotions are bad, like depression is a great example of this. When we feel depression, the first thing we want is for it to go away.
right.
We want it to leave. So what we're doing is trying to push it away. And by pushing it away, it gets stronger and it wants to come back. The best thing we can do when we feel any emotion is feel it as deeply as we possibly can. Because what most people don't understand, and I never realized this until a while into this work, is what is an emotion? We never even ask that question. What is it physically? And all it is a chemical reaction inside our body. And a chemical reaction, that there's a famous neuroscientist who talks about this. And she says if the chemical reaction of an emotion, if you do nothing with it, lasts 90 seconds. So if you just learn how to allow the emotion to come up, process it and let it go, it's gone in a minute and a half. And yet, because of the way we've been taught to deal with these emotions, we can make the feeling of depression last for decades. I was depressed for years. It should have only been 90 seconds. And
Oh,
this work means that it never becomes chronic, because when we feel something, we allow ourselves to really feel it, and then it just passes. So it never gets to the chronic stage.
this is very persuasive. So can you share how do you process your emotions now? What do you do in order to process them, to integrate them, to so we mentioned acknowledgement, which is a big one because many people don't we are so educated, so indoctrinated to to ignore and not feel, and so we don't even know what we feel anymore. Can you say what are you doing now in order to in when it comes to processing emotions?
Yeah, so I'll go back to how I learned to do it to begin with. So for anyone learning who's at the start of the process, because that's probably more powerful, is that I remember I've got a very vivid memory sitting with my therapist very early on. And I was going through a lot in my life: depression, suicidal thoughts, breakup of my marriage, my company closing down. And he asked me to describe how I was feeling. And I answered, and he said to me, "That's not how you feel, Paul. That's how you think. That's what you think about the situation. I want you to tell me how you feel about it." And I said, "Oh." And I answered again. And he said, "You've just done it again. You're not describing how you feel." And I remember saying to him, I've got nothing else to give you. What happens to most of us is we've been suppressing our emotions for so long, we can't even acknowledge them anymore. We don't even feel them. So the first thing to do is to start educating ourselves about the emotions. So I remember thinking one day, I don't even have the vocabulary. I don't have the words. I could say, and I see this a lot in people who I coach and people around me. If I say to somebody, my nephew who's 15, love him with all my heart, I can say to him, how was school today? And he says, good. And I say, what was football like after school? And he says, good. And I say, didn't you, your mum told me you got in trouble with the teacher. What was that like? And he goes, not good. We don't have the vocabulary. So the first thing I did, and I created this to put in my book as well, charts with emotions. And I changed the words. Instead of positive and negative, I call them understood and misunderstood emotions, because we feel like we understand joy and love and happiness, and we don't really understand the anger and anxiety. But so what I started doing it to begin with, and this sounds to a lot of people, especially I was in my late 30s when I was doing this work, and I was laughing to myself because I was like, if I felt like a 5-year-old again. I'm teaching myself, like teaching myself how to read. I would sit with the emotional charts, and then at the end of a day, I would sit with a piece of paper and a pen, and I would think about things that had happened in my day, and I'd look at the charts and think, what do I feel? Which of these words describe what's happening inside me? And then slowly over time, I would build up so I understood more what was happening.
Wow, this is beautiful. So first of all, acknowledging, and then use language to describe, use vocabulary, enlarge your vocabulary.
Absolutely. And then the biggest one I would say for anybody who wants to try doing this is to write about it. So give yourself time and space, whatever it is. And you can do this on a daily basis, but then it's important, if you've had problems, to go back through your past and to process old situations that you will have never done this for properly, and allow yourself to write about how you felt and how you feel and tell the truth. So don't hold anything back. And one of the problems with that is, because we've all been taught to be very nice people, our brain will tell us we're not allowed to think certain things, especially about people we love. So there will be emotions that come up that we feel ashamed of, and then we get in this loop. Say again, Pop?
We censor them.
We censor them, exactly. So the reason I say to people to write things down, and I also developed that over time, because I used to tell people to write it in a journal. And then someone said to me once they'd done it and it didn't really work. And I said to them, tell me the truth. Were you completely honest about how you felt when you wrote it down? And they said, no. And I said, why? And they said, I was worried my wife might read what was in the journal. And some of the problems are with her. And this will happen with husbands, wives, children, parents, family members, friends. And I said, well, okay, what we need to do then is write it on loose paper. And when you've finished, destroy it. Take it outside somewhere safe and set it on fire. So no one will ever see it. No one needs to see it. No one needs to hear what you said, but you need to tell the truth about how you feel. And some of the things I've written over time, if anybody had seen them, they'd say, you've said some vicious things in there, hateful, aggressive, resentful. And I was like, yeah, but they were feelings that I had, and I'd been holding them inside for so long. I needed to let them out. And by writing them down and telling the truth, you let them out. And again, this is a counterintuitive thing. A lot of people say to me, but if I start allowing that feeling to come out, it will consume me and it'll destroy my relationship with this person or that person. And I was saying, I understand the fear. It's the opposite happens. What happens is, once you've processed all these emotions that you've been holding onto for so long, they clear, and it leaves then space for compassion to come in, for love to come in, for peace to come in. But while we're holding on to them, we don't create that space. We're just constantly keeping everything closed down.
I understand. Sometimes regarding journaling, people are reluctant to journal because they think if they will write about old traumas and how they felt about them, They are writing their way to depression again. But for you, it worked.
Yeah, for me it's the opposite. And look, again, it goes back to the do what works for you. And if I believe everything has to happen at the right time for each individual. And if I would say for anybody who struggles with anything like that, it's worth investing in getting a good coach or a therapist who can guide you through it, because then you can have someone sitting next to you and it helps you know that they've been there and they've done this. So they're like a safe guide to take you through this path so that you don't spiral off and you don't lose control. But fundamentally, for me, it's the process of going through these things and processing them for the first time properly. It has the opposite effect of what you'd be afraid of.
Yeah. Can you give me an example nowadays how you process an emotion that emerges?
Yeah. So the beautiful thing about this work is it's like anything else. You everybody the way to think of it is you're learning a new skill. So it takes time. It's like the first time anyone drove a car. The first time you drive a car, you think, okay, hands on the wheel, left foot, right, left hand, right hand. But then 5 years later, you don't even think about it. So by practicing this stuff over and over again, you then slowly get to a place. And there's lots of other things I plug into this with, is like the personality work, shadow work, things like that. Whereas now I can sit and just think about something and do it all in my head. I can think what's happened today. What did I feel about this? Oh, I felt, and I'll sometimes say it out loud because that helps just to say it out loud. Oh, I feel anxious about this thing that's happening. Oh, okay. Where do I feel the anxiety? And then we can talk about the physical aspect of emotions. We feel it in our body. Oh, okay. What does anxiety actually feel like? Well, actually, I actually quite liked, and this is a bit of talking about the NLP part before.
Yeah, the
When
second.
we talk about pain or anxiety, or they're just sensations in our body, and once you understand them, I actually quite like the anxiety is for me is like a tingly, it's like a tingling feeling. I actually quite like it's like if I can feel the energy, and I'm like, okay, that's okay. And part of the training is to train to rewire your brain that it's okay to feel that way. So I can just do it quite quickly now. Go, oh, what's this feeling? That's anxiety. Where can I feel it? How does it feel? What's the sensation? That's okay. Is there anything I need to do to help me with it? Or can I just feel it and let it go? Sometimes I'll need to do something, sometimes I won't. Sometimes I'll speak things out loud, sometimes I'll write them down.
And then within 90 seconds, they disappear. The emotion disappear and
That's the end game. This is, that's on my best day. 90 seconds is what will happen. But I still have times where you're dealing with life. I always say to people, life's like waves. We don't want to, people think when they're doing any work like this that the idea is to flatten the wave, but it's like a heartbeat. If you flatten a heartbeat, you're dead. The
right.
whole point of life is it's up and down. You will always have things to deal with. There will always be challenges. So the idea is, I always say, what we're doing with this work is learning how to surf. We want to become a good surfer. And guess what? Even the best surfers in the world sometimes fall off the surfboard. And that's okay. That's all part of the development is to understand that we're students, we're learning a new skill, and it takes time and practice. And to be one of the keys to all of this is to be kind to yourself as you're doing it.
Can you say more about this?
Well, this is all goes back to the I'm good enough. I'm good enough as I am. So that thought inside your head, if you go back to my story about the juice fasting, that I was being for anybody who does that exercise of observe your own thoughts, what we usually find is we're not very nice to ourselves inside our own heads. We're very nice to people on the outside, but inside our own heads, we criticize ourselves. We call ourselves stupid. We call ourselves idiots. We tell ourselves it's not enough. And what we want to slowly change is that story. So I used to be horrible to myself inside my own head. And over the years, I've slowly changed that voice. And now that voice is very nice. Now that voice is very understanding. A good way to think about it is think of yourself as a small child. And whenever you're talking to yourself inside your own head, talk to that child. Because that's effectively what we're doing. We're going back to that point when that child started to learn all of these things that have created problems. And we want to go back to that child and say, it's okay. Put your arm around them. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to, we're all flawed human beings at the end of the day. We're all the same. We all make mistakes. And it helps generally in life then, because I used to believe, as most, if you go online, you think the world's full of bad people. And now I believe that the world's full of good people who make mistakes.
Oh,
And the more you can go down that path and you apply that to yourself as well as to everybody else, you slowly unwind all of these problems and replace it with just a gentler way of being.
so this kind of kind kind inner talk to yourself and the emotions processing, when it came to the AS, to the ankylosing spondylitis symptoms, when did you notice that the symptoms are decreasing, that you have less stiffness, less pain, that you are more free in your movement?
Well, with it, similar time when I said to you about, the change from like to becoming peaceful and content, it was already getting better then. I went from, when I first came off the drugs, things got a lot worse before they got better. There was a spell where I couldn't move. I lay down. I tell a story in the book that my back was sore one day and I lay down on the floor to try and relieve the pain, and I couldn't get back up. And I was living on my own with a dog at the time. She was only a baby, and she came running in and she was licking my face because she thought I was playing a game. And I just remember I started to laugh, and I was like, "This is us now." Like I couldn't reach my phone. So I just lay there and we fell asleep, and then I slowly got myself off the floor. But that was the lowest point, and then it slowly got better from there. And I actually did have about it was before the first lockdown, so it's about 18 months ago now. I did experience complete relief from all symptoms,
What,
and
what,
it was what I realized was it was because I I had successfully focused on what I wanted to do in life. I was allowing myself to be who I wanted to be. Because what I realized was the whole lawyer route, I was suppressing this creative side of myself. And actually, what I wanted to do was be on stage and perform and make people laugh and tell stories. And I'd had this weekend with a podcast that I contribute to around football, and we'd done 3 live shows in touring around Ireland, and I had a great time. And when I came home 2 days later, I woke up in the middle of the night and my symptoms had all just released. They'd just gone. I could move everything. There was no pain. It was all fine. And then lockdown happened and a couple of other things happened in my life. And it was like the universe showed me it was possible and then said, you know where you need to go now. So that's where my focus in life now is, back to what you said about, and this is where I do believe in NLP and law of attraction type stuff, which is then focus on what you want in life. Focus on what makes you happy and brings you joy and bliss. I was chatting to an Ayurvedic doctor, ancient Indian medicine, and when I was chatting to her about it, she said it very casually, and I loved it. She said, "Oh, so you found the answer?" And I said, "What's that?" She went, "Bliss. Bliss is the answer. When we exist in that state of bliss, there is no pain, psychological, emotional, physical. It all just goes away. The problem is we've created societies in which we very rarely get to live in that bliss. There's a lot of hate, there's a lot of anger, a lot of anxiety, and then we're taught to suppress it all. We're taught to dislike each other and fight with each other. And I don't, my life now is completely, I don't get involved in anything. I don't watch the TV, I don't watch the news, I don't watch the media. I don't really use social media because it all ties into the same problem.
that's right, that's right. But how can you tell a person who is suffering to find this bliss when, I mean, it is a cycle that you have to break.
It's the way I always describe it to people, again, my approach is very different to the personal development world. So you'll hear lots of people saying, well, you just need to, they use phrases like, just jump off the cliff, take a leap of faith.
Right.
And I always say to people, no, don't do that. And they say, why? I say, because it sounds that's petrifying. Picture it. If you stood on the edge of a cliff and someone says, jump off, there's people on the beach. I'd be saying, well, half of them are dead. They
That's right.
died when that's what we feel. We've got to think of the imagery. And I always say to people, I'm on the beach. And people say, well, how did you get to the beach? And I say, there's a set of stairs around the corner. Just don't jump. Go to the stairs. And all you need to do today is take one step. That's all you need to do. And if tomorrow you don't want to take another step, don't take another step. You can take the second step whenever you're ready. And whether it takes 24 hours or 10 years, it doesn't matter. The whole point is that you're slowly moving forward whenever it suits you, and be kind to yourself, and you will get to wherever you're meant to be. And as long as that's the process you take, everything becomes easier.
This is very liberating because you don't give homework to the sufferer. Do this, and this, and take a leap of faith and jump off the cliff. You tell them, take it in your time. Take your time, be kind, live only for this day, follow your bliss, etc. So this is your doctrine, more or less.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And there are, I give exercises to do to people, and there's exercises in the book, but it's all part of the same thing, which is I had a guy I've been coaching. He's only been coaching for 2 months, and I always say to people, think about it. So I was 38 when I started doing this work, so I'd been programmed to think and feel a certain way for 38 years. And we expect to change overnight. But when you think about it, well, that's not reasonable, is it? It would be reasonable for me to think if it took 38 years to become the way I was, it should take another 38 years to change. So it shouldn't be until I'm 76 that I feel better. And actually, the gift is, no, you can start feeling better really quickly. There was a guy I was coaching, and he was in a really, really bad place. And 4 weeks later, he was feeling better. But I could see already he'd started to put himself under too much pressure. So my prescription, if we can call it that as a coach, was to take a break. I told him to take 3 weeks off over Christmas. And he took 3 weeks off, and he came back, and he'd learned even more by taking the break, because he'd learned how to be kind to himself, which is all part of it anyway. So it's all about doing what's right for you, and being kind and taking your time. And when we think that part of the problem is this idea that we need to win and we need to do it quickly and we need to, well, part of the change of life is to go, no, it's okay. I'm okay as I am.
Wow, this is really counterintuitive, but I see your point, like taking the load, the burden of you have to do this and this and this. You have to do. And
Well, think about it from the self-esteem perspective. So think, if on my theory, the problem is we don't feel good enough. So the personal development world, let's say you want to lose weight. This is why I call it how to solve any problem, because it applies to everything. Let's say you want to lose weight, and the personal development world says, right, you need to get up at 6 a.m. every morning. You need to have your clothes by the bed, your trainers, your running shoes, your gym gear. Get out of bed. Don't be a pussy. Get up, run. It doesn't matter whether it's cold or not. You might do that for a week. You might do it for 2 weeks. You might do it for 3 weeks. But sooner or later, you're going to stop, because it's really, really difficult to do. And when you stop, you're going to beat yourself up about it. And you're going to tell yourself it's because you're not good enough. And all you're doing is making the problem worse over time. Now, and the problem, then we get what you see, and this is why the online world is so dangerous. Everyone who says that you should do it like this, they'll have someone it works for, and then they show you that person, and you say, it works. And they say, yeah, do what I did and it works. And that's why I always say, whatever works for you is great. That's fine. The problem is, for most people, if the problem is that you don't feel good enough, doing something that makes you feel like you're not good enough still doesn't help in the long run. It's just going to keep you trapped in that cycle. So the key is to gently work on feeling better about yourself first.
I see. If you had to instill one insight of all the things that you learned from your experience and give an advice to a chronic pain sufferer, or for someone who suffers of a chronic condition, what would you tell him or her?
there's a few things that the number one thing that I always say to people, if I've been doing this type of coaching now for about 2 years, so I've observed people all around the world with all different issues, different levels of problem, different types of problem, and I've observed who makes progress faster. And I talk about, like, so think about all of us like we're a computer. When we were born, you're like a blank computer, and you've had lots of programs installed in you, and that's what's turned you into who you are today. And lots of those programs are dangerous and they're dysfunctional, and we're trying to undo those programs and replace them with healthier ones. The sad thing about the analogy is, if it was a computer, we'd just wipe it clean and start again. But you can't do that with a human. We need to slowly undo what we've got and replace it with something else. And what I noticed over time was, let's say that be kind to yourself is a program that you can install.
Yeah.
The people who install the be kind to yourself program first and most powerfully make changes the quickest. The be kind to yourself program is like a super program that helps all of the other programs install faster. Because if you're not being kind to yourself,
how do you deactivate the older program of being hard on yourself?
This is the key. So, and again, this is a counterintuitive thing. What will happen is you have a thought or a feeling at this level, and then when you're being mean to yourself, it's your next thought or feeling that's the problem. So let's say you feel anxious, and then you've been trained that feeling anxious is bad. So your next thought is, that's not good enough. Now, someone will say, well, Paul told me I need to be kind to myself, and I'm not being kind to myself. So now this is bad. So now I'm being mean to myself about being mean to myself. And this can just keep going down in layers. So the key is, wherever you catch these thoughts, you be nice to yourself. And it's really counterintuitive, because the first thing is to be nice to yourself about being mean to yourself. So when you catch yourself saying something bad inside your own head to yourself, instead of saying, you're not meant to do that, which is more self-hate,
Right.
you say, I just noticed I was being nasty to myself inside my own head. Okay, that's okay. It's okay to be nasty to myself inside my own head. I've been learning to do that for years. Now we'll gently change that, because that little moment of being kind to yourself for being nasty to yourself sounds so counterintuitive, but you're already starting the reprogram to be kind. And then slowly over time, it will work its way up the chain. So then you get to the point where if you just practice gently, and a good way to do this, actually, like little practical tips, I like to combine psychological, emotional, and practical stuff, is things like set yourself reminders that reprogram your brain. So put on your screensaver on your phone, be kind to yourself. Leave little sticky notes on your computer around your home that just say, be kind to yourself. You're just a student. I had them at one point. I was living in an apartment by myself, and if you'd have walked into my apartment, you'd think I was a psychopath. I had these sticky notes all over the whole place, and they just had these little messages: be kind to yourself. You're only a student. Everything's okay. All of your emotions are valid. And what that does is just gently puts in your mind, because think about the world. We're constantly being bombarded with all these negative messages. So what you're doing is slowly just giving yourself these healthier messages. And then over time, we get to a point where, because we've practiced and practiced and practiced being kind, it becomes second nature.
Wow. And according to you, this runs the show? This is the master key to healing?
That's the master key. Because if you can't be kind to yourself, whenever you try to do something else, so I can go to, well, the next thing is this. But if you try to install that program, the nasty program will say, no, that doesn't work. It doesn't work. This is useless. You're not very good at this. And don't get me wrong, we can still make progress. That's lots of people. That was me. We can still make progress. But the more you can be kind to yourself to begin with, and practice that first, that's the gold dust.
So you were talking about acceptance. radical acceptance of what is, even now when you mentioned the being kind to yourself, even when you notice that you are mean to yourself. What is the role of acceptance in healing? How do you perceive that because we are resist, and you mentioned what we resist persist. People, when they suffer, they do resist their situation. And also I wanted to ask you, what is your relationship with pain now? When you have a pain coming, how do you talk to it? How do you process it now versus, and how does this attitude to pain, how this new relationship with pain, how does it contribute to further healing?
Well, it's really interesting because the two questions actually tie in together, and they tie in with the be kind to yourself. So again, I use this phrase all the time, counterintuitive. The counterintuitive thing about healing is you will heal when you accept yourself as you are. So think about it. So for me, the basis is you feel like you're not good enough. Well, if you continue to try and heal, you're telling yourself the story all of the time that there's something wrong with you. And the key is to get to a place where you go, well, what if I had this for the rest of my life?
Yeah.
What's so bad about it? What difference does it make? That's true acceptance. That's true letting go. It's okay. My life's good. And this is where if you focus on other things, you say, well, a question I used to get asked a lot, and I used to ask other people is, if it wasn't for the illness, if it wasn't for the pain, what would you do? And this ties into the stories we tell ourselves. So I would say things like, I'd play more sport, I'd play tennis. I haven't played tennis for years because my neck was sore. And then one day I realized that was a lie. I'm quite lazy. And actually, I don't want to play tennis. I just use the pain as an excuse. And by being able to be honest with ourselves and being kind about that and saying it's okay to be lazy, I don't want to, that in itself makes us go, oh, okay. So now I don't need the pain as that excuse. So that's an acceptance part. And then the way I look at pain now is completely different. It goes back to what we were talking about before. I don't see it as a bad thing. I see it as a teacher. So if my pain increases, I used to think, I wish you would go away. Now I talk to it like a friend. I'll sometimes even say out loud, I'll say, oh, hello, you've come back. What is it you're trying to teach me? And I will ask that question. Our systems are miraculous. It blows me away how we've created a civilization where we've just completely disregarded how miraculous our body is and our mind is. And I used to go to sleep and I would ask my body a question. I would say, why do we have this pain? What are you trying to show me? I can do that now awake. I can be walking around and just say to my body, why has the pain come back? And it'll give me the answer. It'll just tell it, just pops up. And I go, oh, of course. You've been, and it's,
once you have the answer,
well, it depends what it is. Then it comes back to processing the emotion. It's usually around you've faced, my body created a lot of these conditions and pain because it was a distraction from dealing with something that was too painful to deal with. So if I had a great example of this with a guy I was coaching, and on the call we were on, I was telling him how his pain, his physical pain, one of the roles your physical pain plays is it's like your mind lighting a fire. So over here, we've got an emotional situation that we don't know how to deal with, maybe with a close family member. When we see that, internally our system goes, we do not want to look at this. It's too painful. So it just lights a fire over here. It says your back's in pain. So then guess what? You focus on the back pain instead of on the emotional problem, and it distracts you. And I was on this call with someone I was coaching, and in the middle of the call, a Zoom call like this, he just suddenly went to me. We were talking about something really difficult from his childhood, and he suddenly went to me, I'm in agony with my back. It's just, the pain has just gone from 2 to 10. And I said to him, it was like a breakthrough moment for him, because I said to him, okay, if that pain was physical, What has changed in the past 5 minutes? You haven't moved. You haven't lifted any weights. No one's hit you. What's physically, nothing's changed. And he
Right.
said, oh yeah. I said, so it must be in your mind. And the reason it's in your mind is it doesn't want you to have this conversation because it's too difficult. It doesn't want you to focus on the emotion. So the
Oh,
way out of it, again, counterintuitively, is to say to the pain when it's doing that, no, I'm going to sit and focus on the emotion, whatever that is. So it may be anger, anxiety, fear, whatever.
wow.
Deal with the emotion and allow that and sit with that.
I think it's very brave to go in, although it's natural to feel and to have emotions. In our society, it takes bravery. It's like you need a lot of courage to go deep and meet your demons and monsters and painful traumas from the past. Sit with them, entertain them.
That's exactly the way you've described it is perfect. That's exactly what it is. And it's the old. There's lots of old quotes about this. There's a Joseph Campbell one about the treasure you seek is in the dark cave you don't want to enter. It's all of these types of things, and that's why most of the online world and personal development world to me doesn't help because it's the toxic positivity you mentioned before. It just wants you to focus on the good stuff when the reality is if you really really want to change your life, you need to get to know the darkness. That's how you get true self-acceptance and true self-love, by learning to love the parts of you that you've been burying for years, the dark parts that you were taught weren't right. And when you can learn to accept those and love those, then you come out the other side. That's where you find bliss.
So, do you believe we can heal anything? Do you think that a human being can heal himself of any malady?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah,
Wow,
yeah,
this is optimistic and it is based on experience, on
yeah. I think once you've been down this rabbit hole, the deeper you go, the more you believe. It's undeniable. The number of people you see, that you meet, that talk about this stuff.
what is your take on visualization? People say they heal with visualizing themselves in the future and feeling the emotions, how they would feel when they are healed, and focusing, taking yourself in time forward to the situation to the life that you want to have. I,
I
I,
think it.
I ask you,
I think it's like lots. Go on, sorry.
no, because you mentioned that you have understanding in NLP and they do it in, in all kind of meditations and visualizations techniques and imagining the blood flow, the circulation, imagining, interfering with, not interfering, but engaging with the mind, with the physiological mechanism, physiological processes. How powerful it is in your
I think it's really powerful, and I think there's some very important like distinctions in there about, and when we make mistakes, and I've made mistakes in the past, is that if you picture something as being in the future, it will always be in the future. So if your language and your visualization is this is what I will be at some point, you never make that. It's like we've been taught in life to chase things. So we chase money, we chase relationships, we chase the perfect dream, the perfect life. And I always say to people, when you say you're chasing something, by definition, what is the thing doing that you're chasing? It's running away from you. You can't chase something that's standing still. You'd catch it. You,
right.
you have so by telling yourself you're chasing something in the future, you're telling yourself you'll never have it. So the key is to visualize as though it's already here. And that's a gratitude practice. So instead of saying I want to be healed, you say thank you for being healed. I am already healed.
Wow.
That's my life now. I am healed.
I love this stuff. This is very powerful. Can I ask you regarding the power of belief, because it is related to what you just said. And I will ask you another questions in relation to this. So now you have experience with many people that you have helped them. Who lingers behind and do not heal, and who heals quickly? What did you notice? Why some people don't heal quickly, and some people they can make it in a jiffy, like you mentioned, within 24 hours?
I don't think there's I think there's too many things that come together to the moving parts that you can't nail down. My belief is that everything I very much like I've got high faith now. I believe in the universe and I'm very spiritual, and I believe everything happens for a reason and everything happens at the right time for everyone. So for it, go back to me, for example,
Yeah.
and this is where the way you change how you view the world is important, because I now see that my pain and the fact that I didn't heal overnight is a gift, because it allowed me to learn more and more and more about this stuff. So I wouldn't do what I do now for a living. I wouldn't have written that book if I'd healed in 24 hours. So to me, the journey I've been on has been a gift, not a curse. I used to think of it like a curse. Now I'm like, no, it's a gift. So what I do see in the patterns I see, and when I talk about heal, I don't even just necessarily mean physically heal from conditions. I mean about physical things, yes, but also things like overcoming depression, um, healing relationship problems, healing relationships with family members, overcoming anxiety and anger issues, suicidal thoughts, people who've said, it saved their life doing this work, coming off medication. So many people coming off medication. Um, and what I see is everybody makes progress to begin with. And then where people get stuck is when there's a dark cave that they just don't want to go in. They're not ready to go in. And I always say it's exactly what we were saying before. That's okay. Those people might have gone down 10 steps and their life is better than it used to be, and they've learned lots of stuff. Another analogy I use is deep sea diving. Have you ever been like scuba diving? And so the deeper you dive, the
Yes.
higher the more there's pressure. So
Yes.
you have to go slowly, and sometimes you have to stop to equalize the pressure
Yeah, to
before
calibrate.
you can go further.
Huh?
Yeah. So I always think of it like that. So you're doing a deep dive, and some people will dive really deep really quickly and then stop. Some people will dive 10 meters and stop. Different people, different things, because we've all had we're all fundamentally the same, but we've all had different experiences in life. And it doesn't necessarily matter. Someone might have been sexually abused as a child, and somebody might have had quite a nice childhood that had some small traumas in, but they struggle more with that than the person who was sexually abused for whatever reason. There's no sort of prescription to it, and that's where we come full circle back to being kind to yourself. There is no right or wrong answer. There's no set path. There's no you should have healed by this point or you shouldn't. And that's one of the problems we get stuck in, and I did, is that I should be healed by now.
That's right.
And that keeps you in that vicious cycle of, because again, what's that? The message you're giving yourself is I'm not good enough. So you keep yourself trapped. Whereas the quicker you can get to, no, I'm good as I am. I'm always, another analogy I like is it's the whole you're always a student. You'll never master this. It's if you learn how to play the guitar. There's a couple of stories, famous one with Eric. If you ask Eric Clapton what he does for a living, he says, I'm learning how to play the guitar. Because you don't get to a point with a guitar
Yeah.
where someone says, that's it,
Yes,
you've finished.
you take it in an inquisitive, curious way, the journey, not as an end, like as not.
Exactly.
Can I can I ask you also what you said before about processing the emotion? So if someone is coming to you and tells you, this is very common among the chronic pain community. Um, miracles can happen to others, not to me. Like this is a belief that they are stuck with. Yes, this kind of healing that you have seen with your clients can happen to them, but I am overthinking, I am more self-destructive, I am self-abusive. These kind of miracles happen to anything but me. What would you tell him?
That the chronic health condition isn't the thing that they need to heal. It's this belief system. The chronic health condition is just a symptom. It's just a side thing, and that's the case for most of this stuff. And it ties into the multiple personality work I do. So that personality character that they've created over time has been created for a reason. So they should ask themselves, Joey said before about what benefits do you get from being sick? They should ask themselves, what benefits do they get from being that character? Because that character has been created to protect them over time. It does things like it gives them certainty. One of the biggest needs we all have as a human is the need for certainty and control. And we'll often meet that need in very unhealthy ways. It's why people stay in unhealthy relationships and jobs that they don't like, because they'd rather have the certainty of it being bad than the uncertainty of what might happen if they leave. So it's that type of character is telling them a story because it's trying to protect them from the unknown. So the key is to get to know that character and what that character has done for them, learn how to love that character, and then gently say to the character, thank you for looking after me for all these years, but I do want to change. I do want to change my life. And if we're going to change, we're going to have to take some chances. And we only need to take a small chance. We don't need to jump off the cliff.
Right.
But we just need to take the small chance. And another big one, actually, is to ask yourself, and this is no matter what you're trying to change in your life, do you really want to change? Or if you're honest with yourself, are you happy the way you are? The guy who taught me NLP told me a great story once. This is many years ago. And there was a husband and wife, and the wife wouldn't leave the house. She had agoraphobia, chronic, hadn't left the house for years. And the husband convinced her to come and see the NLP master to see if he could heal her. And she agreed. So she came and he put it into a trance. And the husband was desperate for it to heal. And the husband stayed in the room while the guy put her in a trance, and he took her down into a deep trance, and he started asking her questions. And there's a long story, but the very short version is he got to a point where he said,
interesting.
He said, what is wrong? And she said, I don't want to go outside. And he said, I don't know why the question came to me. I just said to her, do you want to heal? And she's in a deep trance. And she said, no. And he said, why don't you want to heal? And she said, I like my life. When I'm like this, my husband does everything for me. I get to stay in the house. I don't want to go outside. I watch TV. I watch movies. He does all the shopping. He brings everything to me. I like my life.
In a trance. So.
And then and the husband heard her say it. And then she came around. But that was the truth. That was what she was. The trance allowed her to tell the truth out loud. And a lot of the time, with lots of this stuff, I use diet and exercise is a great example of this. When people say, I want to lose weight, and they talk for years, I want to lose weight. And I always say to people, be honest with yourself. And if you stay out of your head, just honestly, scale of 0 to 10. If 0 is you don't want to lose any weight, and 10 is you are desperate to lose weight, just tell me what number pops into your mind. Don't think about it. And people will often say 3. And I'm like, that's why you don't want to lose weight. And then when we dig into it, we say, I've got a friend like this. I say, so why is it you're telling me you want to lose weight? And it turns out they don't want to lose weight. Their wife wants them to lose weight. It's like, so this is an important question for all of us. How much do I want to change? How much? Because this comes back to the story of, we tell ourselves this is a bad thing, the chronic pain, the illness, whatever it is. But actually, if it's giving us excuses to not do all these things we don't want to do, what does the world look like if we don't have the pain anymore?
Boring.
Boring's a great one. Lots of this is about, it gives us adventure. gives us attention, gives us significance. Well, without my pain, who am I? I used to get so much significance from telling people, because I ran a marathon once, but that wasn't enough. I didn't tell people I ran a marathon. People would say to me, how did you run a marathon when you've got all those problems with your body? That would make me, and I wasn't just a marathon runner. I was a marathon runner who had AS. So part of my healing was to let go of that and stop talking about it. Stop telling people about it. Stop taking sympathy for it.
So it comes back to what you said before, identify the underlying need that you have and address it with healthy ways. Like if the need is safety, and this is a strong need, safety and control. And as human beings with a volatile life that can shatter any moment, we all need safety and control, even if we have to pay the price of adventure and going to the unknown, etc., etc. So how can you address safety in a healthy way, or the need to control, to feel control on your life?
So it's a big question. So it depends. The key is to get into specifics. What is it that if you don't feel safe, if you don't feel like in control, what is it? Be specific. What is it you don't feel in control about? What is it you would like more control of? What is it you would like more certainty of? It may be that you have a very volatile financial life. You don't get, you're constantly chasing money. You're worried about money all the time. Well, actually, in that situation, okay, take control of your finances. And it sounds crazy because it's like, no, this is over here and this is over here. Like, no, if you give yourself certainty around finances, you're helping to meet that need for certainty and control. Well, guess what? You don't need it to be met with the pain anymore. So you might find that dealing with the finances helps the pain to go away. Same with other things. You may be in a dysfunctional relationship that gives you no certainty and no safety and no control. Well, one of the solutions may be to leave that relationship and to give yourself certainty. There's so many different angles to this. So the thing to do is to sit down in your own life and to be honest, be really honest with yourself with compassion. What is it in my life that is not giving me certainty right now? In what ways would I like to have more certainty? Money was a big one for me. Because I ran my own businesses, I was always financially unstable. Some months I'd have lots of money, some months I'd have no money, but I was always thinking about it and worried about it without realizing it. And as soon as I stopped and looked, I was like, I need more financial stability. It may be that I moved around a lot, like physically from different places, because I like variety. But then I realized that the variety was creating too much instability. I needed more certainty. So then I decided to redesign my life so that I had certainty, and then I could, from the certain base, so good finances and a place to live that I can call home, and then I can travel from there. So that gives me certainty and it gives me variety, but in a healthy way. Mm-hmm. So that's the important thing. And this comes back to, what do we want in life? Like, what do you really want? Be honest with yourself. Not what you've got, not what you think you've got to put up with, not the stories that you're telling yourself. What do you really want?
Well, this is, I agree with you. This is a huge question, but not many people know. We know what we don't want, but how do you help your clients figure out what they want, what they truly want?
It's a great one. I love this because everybody says, or most people say they don't know, but you hit the nail on the head. So there's two sides, and it's another example of an emotion that we're taught is a bad emotion, but it's great. I say to people, what do you think of jealousy? It's bad. We're all taught that jealousy is bad, aren't we? It's a bad thing. I say, well, think of it like this. You just told me you don't know what you want in life. Tell me something you're jealous of about someone else. And they say, well, I'm jealous such a body's got such a nice car. And I'll say, guess what jealousy tells you? What you want. We're jealous of things other people have that we don't have. Now, it might not be the exact thing. It might be a bit more cryptic. It might not be the car. It might be that they've got money or they've got status or they've got, but the feeling of jealousy, when people say to me, I don't know what I want, I ask them 2 questions now. 1, start observing in life and write them down when you see them, things that you're jealous of, and write down all the things you don't want. Because everyone can tell me all the things they don't want.
That's right.
When we've got those 2 things, we've got all the answers we need. Because if someone says to me, I don't want to be in pain, I go, okay. And this is the NLP side of things.
Right.
I go, okay, well, what's the positive side? What's the flip side of that coin? If you don't want to be in pain, if you don't want to smoke, you want to be fit and healthy. So you just literally get a piece of paper and write down in one column everything you're jealous of and everything you don't want. And in the next column, just transpose it. I don't want to smoke. Okay. I want to be fit and healthy. Great.
Nice.
I don't want to spend every month looking at my bank balance, worried about money. Great. I want more money. And then you can expand that out. Okay. What does being fit and healthy mean to you? What does more money mean? How much money? Be specific. And then you can start. This is the back end of the work I do then. Once you've dealt with all the emotional stuff, and well, then you start building your dream life. Be specific about it. Because all of a sudden, whenever people say, I don't know, I always say that's not true. You just don't want to say. Because I'll go through, I had a great example with someone she coached her for 12 months. She's changed her life. She's got rid of all of the emotional problems. So now she's moving into building a dream life, and she started a business. And she said to me, she wants to coach people around grief. And she said, I wouldn't be able to charge people for it. I said, would you feel good enough to do it for free? And she said, yes, I'd do it for free. And I said, okay, so would you be confident to stand on a stage if I get you a room of 200 people and you speak to the room of 200 people for free? And she said, yes. And I said, but you wouldn't be happy and comfortable if you charged them money. And she said, no. And I said, what if I told everybody that they have to pay £1 each, and I'll collect the £1 and I'll give it to you later? And she smiled because she's worked with me a long time, so she knows what's happening. And she said, well, okay, £1. And I said, what about £2? And she laughed and she said, okay, £2. I said, what about £5? And this is how we find out what we really want. The problem is, in our minds, we start with a big black cloud. Like, if for me to tell you what I want, the answer needs to be, I want to be a doctor, I want to be married with 4 kids, and I want to live in a 4-bedroom house. And no, forget that. Come back down to the other side and break it down little piece at a time. And when you do it a little piece at a time, then you can piece it all together. And where I came from when I did that in my own life is, instead of going to the big stuff, is start with the little stuff. So I'd be like, what time do you want to get out of bed every day? In a dream world, I don't like to get up early. So I created a life where I don't have to get up. I don't have to set an alarm. I wake up when I wake up. Changed my life because I sleep as much as I need to sleep now. I like sleep. So when we do these exercises, we can really break down what it is we don't want, what we do want, what we're jealous of, what we do want, and then break that down into its little parts. And then when you've got all those little parts together, you can brainstorm what your life can look like and what you can do. And that's how you build the dream life off the other side.
And Paul, do you believe that this clarity that you gain by being specific, when the cloud fades with a little specific and you create a clear vision, I think this is something that also hinders people of achieving goals, because, there are people who are more prone to auditory cues or to kinesthetic cues, and they don't have a clear vision. Do you believe, you mentioned the law of attraction and synchronicities and being spiritual, etc., but not in the woo mumbo jumbo way of the spiritualistic human being. Do you believe, or did you experience that having a clear vision really magnetize something good? Once you are clear to yourself, then you attract it?
Absolutely.
What is your experience?
I've experienced it in the past 6 months because everything I've just been talking to you about. I realized I finished writing the book in the middle of last year, and I went away for a break. I had a 3 week break, and I realized I was feeling a bit lost. And when I sat and reflected on that and wrote about it, it was because I've spent the last 3 years of my life dealing with all the problems and all the emotional issues and all those things, and they're pretty much sorted now. All the past's been dealt with. And then the big thing was writing the book, and I'd finished writing the book. So then I was like, oh, okay, well, what's next? What's next is focusing on the future and creating a dream life. So all of this is like a foundation, it's a platform to build off. And that's when I started doing more and more of this and focusing on what do I want, and going more. The old version of me would not believe in anything like the law of attraction or anything like that. The new version of me is like, it makes scientific sense to me. Like the whole world is atoms and energy and vibrations, and we can transmit think of what a radio is. A
Yeah,
radio transmits invisible rays from a little box like this, from one side of the planet to the other. And that just scientifically, I think, well, what's inside our head? The thing that's inside our head, the brain, is so powerful that no scientist on the planet understands it. They can't rebuild it. They can't they couldn't recreate it.
sure.
The radio transmitter compared to the brain is nothing.
So
It's so
why do we die if we are so powerful? Why can't we, reprogram something or transmit something or magnetize something which will create immortality?
oh, we could that's a completely different rabbit hole. I could talk for hours about that. So that there's a question there of do we? What is death? What are we? What am I? What are you? And these are types of questions that people get lost in. And I see, and this is where the old me and the new me sort of combine. And I see people having arguments about these things in debates. Do we live in a simulation? Are we in a computer? Is this? And I always say to people, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. What matters is your existence here and now. Maybe by the time look, now we're on. If you took a timeline of humanity, unless we destroy ourselves, which I believe we will at some point, um, already, if just on a very small timeline of humanity, the average age, life expectancy, has gone from like 40 years old to 100 years old. That's a rapid change in a very short space of time if you zoom straight out. So on a timeline of infinity, if our species survived, this is very deep now, isn't it? But if our species survived, then we would achieve practical immortality. That's, for me, it's a side issue. That this all comes back to, well, for our existence right now, what do you believe you can have? And a new friend of mine in my new world said about the law of attraction. He said, when you stop and think about it, it's just confirmation bias. You see in life whatever you focus on. So what happens to most people is we focus on negative things. So we see it all the time. That's the world we've been built. The societies we've built. We get told that people are bad. So we see it everywhere. The news shows us people being bad. It shows us war. It shows us murder. It shows us rape. It shows us poverty. So we see it more and more.
Then we reaffirm our convictions by consuming this kind of news and
Exactly. So guess what? The same is true in the opposite. So as soon as your focus pushes all of that away and focuses on happiness, joy, success, peace, love, you get more of it. So people can describe it however they want, energetically, law of attraction, whatever. But I thought my friend summed it up. It's confirmation bias. You see more and more and more of the thing that you believe in, and when that's a good thing, it reaffirms that. So the more you see it, the more you believe that people heal through the power of their own mind and being good to themselves, the more you see it. Guess what? That makes you believe it even more. Your belief becomes even stronger. It's the same with making money. It's the same with building relationships. It's the same with building the life you want. You will start to you start to see things. I often say this to people, it's not what happens externally doesn't change. What changes is what's happening internally for you. So I don't see anything that happens in life anymore as a bad thing. It's like emotions. I just see them as things. So most people I know, if their car breaks down, they see that as a bad thing that has happened and they complain about it and they talk about how bad life is. If my car breaks down, I think, I wonder what that saved me from.
Oh,
I wonder why that happened. Maybe if my car didn't break down, I'd be in a crash in 10 minutes that would have killed me. Or maybe by my car breaking down, the universe is telling me to get a new car. Because I said, it's one of my favorite things when you get into this world, this rabbit hole. People will say, well, I tried to manifest a new job. I wanted a dream job. And I focused on a dream job, a dream job, a dream job. And the next day I got sacked from my job. That's not what I asked for. And if you could speak to the universe would say, well, you can't have your dream job while you're still in a job you don't like. Give me time. You've got to lose this job, and that will motivate you to find the dream job. But if your mindset is that this is bad, you will keep seeing everything as bad. And if your mindset is this is good, you'll keep seeing everything as good. So the law of attraction is just what you believe it to be.
yes, but I know people who, I have a friend in India. I keep telling, I love this girl. She's about your age. She's 38 years old now. And 3 years ago, she got arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, another autoimmune disease. And she wanted to die. She didn't want to live anymore, although she has a son and she loved him and she still does. And she started to meditate and see herself as doing treks in the Himalayas. And she healed within 1.5 years. But her story is about forgiveness. She keeps telling me that the major key for her healing was forgiving people who harmed her, or she perceived them as harming to her back then. And within 1 month or so, she was healed. So how do you see forgiveness as a tool to healing?
I think it's a big part of it. It's always interesting whenever I talk about this stuff because the when I wrote the book is like 200,000 words. When I recorded the audiobook, it's like 14 hours, and you always try to condense the answers into a short space of time. But forgiveness is a huge part, and it's part of the dealing with emotional things from your past. So a lot of the work I do goes back to childhood trauma and childhood events, and not just childhood things that have happened to us throughout our lives. And for the first time, properly process the emotions around those things. And again, a similar thing, and it depends again, some things work for other people and there's no right or wrong answer. But for me, it's process the emotions first and then move to forgiveness.
Mm.
What we're often taught is it's like the NLP thing from earlier, jump to forgiveness. This person hurt me, learn how to forgive them. And I go, there's a middle bit. Learn how to be angry with them first. Learn how to resent them. Learn how to be,
Yeah.
learn how all of the anxiety that they gave you, all of the problems that they gave you. Learn how to express that. Learn how to accept it, that it's okay to feel those things, and then move to forgiveness. And that process is hugely healing because what you're doing is just letting go of all of this stuff that you've been holding on to for decades often.
Is there a book that influenced you, that transformed you? Is there a book or two that you have in mind that played a major role in your healing process?
Yeah, the main one, there's all kinds I've read over the years, but the main, well, there's one on anxiety, which I'd recommend to anyone with anxiety, which is called Dare, Dare, by an Irish guy, Barry McDonough. But the main book, which I must have listened, I like to listen to books. I must have listened to it 12 times in 2 years, is called Letting Go by David Hawkins.
Yeah, letting go of your body pain body or something.
I think it's just called letting go, but it's and that's where it ties in a lot with the work I do. And the last time I listened to it, actually, I thought I disagree, because he talks about positive and negative emotions, and I don't like that still. But when I was first listening to that, it's all about acceptance and surrender and allowing your emotions to be what they are, and it applies. That's why my book is about what it is, and not just healing from illnesses. It applies to everything in your life.
So let's wrap up with your book, the book that you wrote. Why did you call it How to Solve Any Problem in Life? It is a challenging title, and it made me immediately curious. What did you mean by that?
Well, it actually came from, I was in it must have been in 2020. I was traveling around, and I was in a shared co-living house in Spain, like a community of people living together. And one of the things was everybody contributes to the community while you're there, and they do presentations and talks and skill shares and things like that. And someone said to me, "What do you do?" And I say I was a coach and I was doing this stuff. And they said, "Oh, what could you coach about?" And what could you do a session on? And I said, "Well, I could do it on what I coach people about how I help people solve issues in their life." And they said to me, "What would you call the session? Because we need to call it something to write on the board." And just off the top of my head, I said, "How to solve any problem in life."
Mm.
Because that's what it is. It solves. You can come to me with anything, and I'll show you how it all comes down to the same thing. And as soon as I said that title, there were people in the room stopped and turned to me and said, "That's a big claim to make."
That's
And
right.
I said, "It is." And they said, "Okay." And I was there for 3 weeks, and I did the same talk 3 times, and each time it was full. And it just made me think, well, the title clearly
Yeah.
intrigues people. So when I came to write the book, I was like, well, I'm going to use the same title.
Do you focus there on healing, on health?
No, I focus on the very root of it is overcoming low self-esteem and the feeling that we're not good enough. So to me, the theory I believe in, and this is other people believe in this as well, it's not just mine, is that all of our problems, whether it's health or anything else, depression, money problems, relationship problems, they all come down to the idea that we don't feel good enough. So it takes, the book basically goes through the entire, if I was coaching people one-on-one, that I wanted to make it more accessible to as many people as I could to share this stuff. So it takes people through the entire process with stories and lessons and exercises to do, that if I was coaching you, I would take you through that same process. And it takes you through childhood trauma and resolving those things and learning how to deal with your emotions, all the stuff we've talked about in detail. And with forgiveness as well, there's a bit in there about writing letters to people. And another one, a big one that goes hand in hand with forgiveness, is apologies. Apologizing to people for the way you've hurt them, facing the things that you've done to hurt other people. That's part of facing your own demons, facing your darkness. There's a whole chapter on that. And then at the end, there's three phases. So the first phase is called heal. It's about how to heal all of your problems. The second phase is called transform. That's how to transform into the new version of you want to be. And the third section is dealing with some big topics. So there's a chapter on healing from illnesses. There's a chapter on love and relationships, and then general stuff around the world and stuff like that.
Amazing. This was fascinating, Paul. I can spend the whole night talking with you about this kind of stuff, which are what life is made of, our existence here. So I do want to thank you and for sharing your story and your insights. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Lovely talking to you.
Splendid, indeed. I wish you all the best, joy and health, and may your wishes and all the things that you want in life will realize. Thank you.
Thank you.